Good day. This is Irish Flores presenting the Chapter 8 Global Flows of Migrants. In particular, many migrants, especially if they have low skills or are undocumented, have great and increasing difficulty moving about the world because they are heavy. Heavy migrants encounter many structural barriers, including literal walls, bodies of water, and stringent governmental limits that impede their movement. Other migrants are much lighter. Lighter migrants are often encouraged through favorable migration policies to move freely across borders. We will examine these migrants' diverse experiences and the processes through which they move both with and without authorization throughout the world. Let's talk about migrants. But first, what is migration or relocation? It is a population movement associated with globalization. Much of this movement comes from migration, and while migration can occur within a single country, also known as relocation, this chapter focuses on international migration. What is international migrant? International migrant is any person who lives temporarily or permanently in a country where he or she was not born and has acquired some significant social ties in this country. As of 2017, the United Nations estimates there are 258 international migrants, about 3.4% of the world's population. According to some analysts, this number is significant and rising. In reality, it marks an increase from the 173 million migrants in 2000 and the 220 million in 2010. Migrants account for a sizable portion of the population in many regions and nations, even though the numbers today may not be as stunning as they were in the past. Europe, with 80 million migrants, and Asia, with 78 million migrants, are the largest regions attracting new international migrants according to United Nations. But the United States remains the country with the largest migrant population. In 2017, 49.8 million people living there were foreign-born, 15% of the total US population and 19% of the total international migrant population. The US-Mexico corridor is also the world's largest route for international migrants. Other countries with large international migrant populations include Germany, France, and the United Kingdom because of work migration and their geographic proximity to Africa, and oil-producing nations such as the Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates. The countries with the largest numbers of citizens living outside of their borders are India with 16.6 million, Mexico 13 million, Russia 10.6 million, China with 10 million, and Bangladesh with 7.5 million. The nature of today's migrants has undergone some fascinating and significant modification. Compared to the rest of the world's population, they are more likely to be of working age. In 2017, 74% of international migrants were of working age, compared to only 57% of the population broadly. This increase in the working population helps to decrease the dependency ratio. In some high-income countries, international migrants alone are driving population growth. From 2000 to 2015, the total population of Europe would have fallen if it were not for international migration. Our ability to discuss migration is hampered by the fact that there are great difficulties in tracking population flows. First, countries do not collect such data. Second, those that do often don't report them to international agencies. Third, population flows are defined differently in different countries. There are also differences in how they define the permanency of a move and the residency period requited for migrant status. Fourth, few countries keep track of their expatriates. And finally, there are overwhelming difficulties in keeping tabs on undocumented migrants. One must keep these limitations clearly in mind in discussing migration. Let's discuss about migration. Unlike much else in the modern world, like trade, finance, and investment, restrictions on the migration of people, especially labor migration, have not been liberalized. The major exception is in the European Union, which has sparked significant controversy, including Brexit. But elsewhere in the world, the restrictions remain in place. How to explain this anomaly? For one thing, in order to prosper economically, a nation must try to keep the labor it needs, both highly paid professionals of various types and masses of low-paid semi-skilled and unskilled workers. Kung ang mga bansa ay regular na nawalan ng malaking bilang ng naturang manggagawa, ang kanilang kakayahang makipagkumpetensya sa pandaigdigang pamilihan ay magdurusa. Isa pa, ang pagdagsa ng malaking bilang ng mga migrante sa isang bansa ay madalas na humahantong sa salungatan ng iba't ibang uri. Kadalasan sa pagitan ng mga bagong dating at mga taong matagal nang naroroon. Bagaman maaari ring magkaroon ng salungatan sa pagitan ng iba't ibang grupo ng mga migrante. Kaya maraming mga bansa ang mas gusto na mapanatili ang ibang significant barriers sa migrasyon. Terrorism versus migration. The fear of terrorism has contributed to maintain, if not heighten, immigration restrictions in many parts of the world, particularly in the United States and several European countries. This is especially clear in the immense difficulties involved in migrating to the United States today. For example, as of this writing, President Trump continues to push for a ban on immigration from Muslim-majority countries, claiming it is necessary to prevent terrorism, which is being challenged in the courts. Such restrictions have even been extended to people traveling on business and to students wishing to study there. In 2017, there was a sharp drop in the number of student visas issued by the United States. Even those who visit as tourists now often find the process of clearing border control in the United States burdensome and offensive. May pag-aalala na ang mga hadlang na ito ay magiging sanhi na ang mga tao ay dalhin ang kanilang negosyo sa ibang lugar at ang pinakamahusay na mga mag-aaral na mag-aral sa ibang mga bansa at hahantong sa isang malaking pagbaba ng turismo at ng pera ang kikitain mula dito. In the case of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, some restrictions on movement have been erased between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, or business executives and highly skilled workers. Although other barriers remain in effect and have in fact been strengthened and increased. As already noted, easing of these restrictions has often been controversial. Fear of immigration was the main driving force behind Brexit and the return of tighter immigration controls. Because the cities and areas most likely to support Brexit were those with the lowest proportions of immigrants. It is crucial to stress that this was fear of immigration rather than immigration itself. Habang ang mga lugar na may pinakamataas na antas ng mga imigrante ang pinakamalamang natutol sa paglipat. Nonetheless, voters supported Brexit and the government swiftly made plans to erect a wall in Calais, France, to prevent refugees and immigrants from gaining unauthorized access to the United Kingdom via its ferry route. Since many of these barriers are created by nation-states, it is clear that they are a product of the Westphalian era. Prior to that time, people could move around in space pretty freely, but with the formation of the nation-state, such movement came under much greater scrutiny, and a greater number of barriers were built to restrict and control it. However, There was still a lot of freedom of movement at the end of the 19th century, most notably during the Great Atlantic Migration from Europe to the United States. Between 1820 and the end of the 19th century, it is estimated that about 50 million people left Europe for the United States. Prior to 1880, entry into the United States was largely unregulated. Anyone who wanted to get in could get in. In 1889, an international immigration conference declared, "We affirm the right of the individual to the fundamental liberty, according to him, by every civilized nation to come and go and dispose of his person and his destinies as he pleases." It was World War I that changed the situation. Nation states began to impose drastic restrictions on the global movement of people. Today, while there is variation among nation states, there is not a single state that allows free access to all immigrants. Gayunpaman, habang pinag-ihigpitan ng otorisadong paglilipat sa iba't ibang paraan, tila dumadami ang hindi otorisadong imigrasyon, maging sa pagpupuslit ng mga tao sa loob at labas ng iba't ibang bansa. Sa ilang kaso, ang mga bansa ay may mga batas na nag-aatas sa kanila na tanggapin ang mga refugee na tumatakas sa digmaan, politikal na pag-uusig, at iba pa. Para sa mga nakapasok na sa ibang bansa, mayroon man o walang pahintulot o tamang proseso, maaring ang mga umuusbong na negosyo ng mga pandaigdigang remittance, gayon din ang mga teknolohikal na pag-unlad, ang nagiging dahilan ng mas mabilis at mas madali ang paglipat ng bansa. Ito ay maaaring mga posibilidad na naghihikayat na lumipat ng bansang tirahan. A combination of push and pull factors is usually used to explain migration. Push factors are the motivations of the migrants, contextual issues in the home country that make it difficult or impossible for them to achieve their goals there, and major disruptions such as unemployment, low pay, war, famine, political persecution, and economic depression. Pull factors include the favorable immigration policies in the host country, higher pay and lower unemployment, formal and informal networks that cater to migrants, labor shortages, and the similarity in language and culture between home and host country. In the global age, some new factors can be added to this list. There is, for example, the global dispersion of information, which makes it easier to find out about and become comfortable in a host country. Then, there is the interaction of global local networks, which can take the form of formal networks mediated by contemporary technologies like mobile phones and the internet, particularly email, Skype, and social media, or more informal family and social networks, which may very well use the same technologies. All of this makes moving and adjusting to new environments much simpler. Migrants find it simpler to locate accommodation and employment in this context because there are diasporic populations present. The economies of many home countries have also benefited greatly from remittances, which have grown in importance. Bagamat sa pangkalahatan, ang mga patakaran sa migrasyon ay hindi pa liberalisado, nagkakaroon ng piling pagbawas sa mga hadlang sa migrasyon sa maraming bansa. Ito ay hinihimok ng iba't ibang salik, kabilang ang mga kakulangan sa paggawa o labor shortage. Ang mga pangangailangan ng mga multinational na korporasyon o multinational corporations, tumatandang populasyon o aging population, at ang mga bagong tax revenue na inaalok sa mga migrante na maaaring magamit upang tumulong sa pagsuporta sa mga sistema at kapakanan ng estado o bansa. Gaya ng mga nabanggit, ang mga international na migrante ay mas malamang na nasa edad ng pagtatrabaho kumpara sa mas malawak na populasyon. At sa gayon, ay mas malamang na makakapag-aambag sa lipunan sa pamamagitan ng paggawa o pagtatrabaho at buwis. There are special kinds of international migrants. There are refugees, those forced to leave their homeland or who live involuntarily because they fear for their safety. Also, they are asylum seekers, refugees who seek to remain in the country to which they flee. There were about 25.9 million refugees and asylum seekers in the world in 2016. At ayon sa United Nations, noong 2017, habang marami sa kanila ang lumilipat ng mga otorisasyon, marami pa rin ang mga undocumented immigrant. The largest numbers were to be found in Turkey, which has 3.1 million, Jordan, 2.9 million, the states of Palestine with 2.2 million, and Lebanon with 1.6 million. In contrast to other international migrants, refugees are much more likely to migrate to the other low and middle income countries. Many sociological concepts relate to the refugee, including the stranger, the marginal man, and the outsider within. All of these indicate that the refugee is at the very least structurally in an uncomfortable position because he or she is neither fully in the country to which he or she has immigrated, nor he or she in his or her home country anymore. Siyempre, ang katayuan ng refugee sa pangkalahatan ay pansamantala lamang. Posible na ang refugee ay maaaring maging isang mamamayan ng bagong bansa, bumalik sa kanilang bansang pinagmulan, o lumipat sa ibang lugar. That would be all. This is Irish Flores reporting Migrants and Migration. Thank you.